Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Pranzata Podcast. This is your host, Andrea Pranzatelli. This is episode number 126 on the podcast. If you are new to this channel and you like what you hear today, please don't forget to hit subscribe. It is my mission to reach my first 1,000 subscribers this year, and I'm very, very close. So if you can hit that subscribe button, that would actually really help me get closer to my goal. Okay. So today's episode is a solo episode with just me, just to explain to my frequent listeners why I have not been putting a lot of podcasts up. I did make a post about this on my Instagram, so some of you may already be aware of this. But recently my laptop had broke. I've had it for about 4 years now. It was an Acer Predator Helios 300. It actually still technically works, but it doesn't have enough processing power to make video podcasts anymore. It does indeed have enough processing power to handle audio only. So the last episode I was able to record on here with a full video was with Ricky Ramesses, and that was episode 125. I miraculously somehow was able to squeeze out one last video podcast on this computer, but it was really difficult. It took a lot of trial and error. And now I'm going to temporarily only be doing audio podcasts until I get a new laptop. Unfortunately, this was a terrible time of year for my laptop to have this issue because I am a music teacher. I make my income primarily off of teaching piano lessons. I'm also a gigging musician as well. The summer is the slowest time for my music business because a lot of my students are young students who are in grade school. So during the summers, they're typically taking a break, on vacation. And not only that, but I used to supplement that lack of income with gigs in the summer, but I'm living in a new city and I'm still working on building up a name in the Philadelphia music scene. So I did not have the normal weekly gigs that I would have had in North Jersey. At most, I had like 3 or 4 gigs this summer, which is nothing. So that's a little explanation as to what happened. I am going to come back and produce weekly podcasts again, but with audio only. I'm not sure at the moment if I'm going to be interviewing people with audio only or if I'm going to hold off on interviewing people until I can pay for a new laptop again. But here we are, we're back. So the first thing I'd like to discuss on this episode is I'm going to start with a story about a sickness that I just had that was chronic and ongoing for the past 4 months. It's definitely an interesting story and it taught me a lot and it changed my perspective. So I just want to share my experience about chronic illness. If anybody else out there is currently dealing with a chronic illness of their own and they're unable to find relief, maybe this will help you in some kind of way. Or maybe you have a chronic ongoing condition of some kind. I know some people who have POTS, I think it's called POTS. You know, there's all different kind of things that people live with, scoliosis, back pain. So I don't know. I thought this might be an interesting episode for people like that who are suffering with chronic pains, illnesses, etc. So recently, in the past 4 months, I had developed some severe allergies, which was very interesting because I had never in my life had allergies. And when I say allergies, I'm referring specifically to airborne allergies. I don't have any known food allergies, nor did I have any negative reactions to foods. So we can rule that out. But I had been basically, for the most part, chronically sick since April. And when I really do the math there, that's 4 months. That's 4 months of the year, you know, April, May, June, July, August, 4 going on 5 months at this point. Well, I'm actually recovering now, so hopefully it's finally at the end of it. But back to the story, I had randomly started developing these allergy symptoms in April, and pretty much the only symptom I actually really suffered with was nasal congestion, a really blocked and dry nose. And while for some people that's like, oh, well, that's not a big deal, it was actually one of the worst experiences I ever went through, to be chronically congested in my nose for that long. Unless it's something you've actually ever experienced, it's extremely hard to even explain to people. I didn't have sneezing, I didn't have coughing, I didn't have a runny nose, but the best way I can explain this to you is that the nasal congestion was so severe that I couldn't breathe through my nose at all anymore. There was no air coming in my nose. I can only breathe through my mouth, which made sleeping really difficult, which made exercising really difficult. And not only that, but the blockage in my nose was affecting my ears and my hearing. So there were weird symptoms going on in my ears, which I was so confused. I thought I was getting ear infections, but what it turned out to be is that when your nose is blocked that seriously for that long, your sinuses are filling up with fluid, and that's going to affect your hearing. That's going to affect your ears. And when I explained further why this was so serious to have my nose blocked for this long, there were then some symptoms coming up later that made everything worse for me. So I started, you're supposed to sneeze out of your nose. You're supposed to have a runny nose sometimes to get rid of toxins out of your body. But since my nose was so inflamed and nothing can come out of it anymore, everything was going into my mouth, and I was getting this post-nasal drip. If you've never experienced this before, for me, mine was very severe. I had to spit so much that I actually had to carry a spit cup with me everywhere I went, even in public. Like, I had to go on the train with a spit cup. It was disgusting, and that's not something I would ever do. I'm kind of like a clean freak, like germaphobe type of person. So the idea of carrying a spit cup is not something I would ever consider doing. It was actually that serious that I didn't have a choice. I couldn't swallow everything that was coming out of my mouth. So I had to bring a spit cup with me, and I tried to do it discreetly to not get a lot of attention. I would bring a water bottle, and I would pretend that I was sipping out of the water bottle, but I would just kind of turn and make sure nobody was looking and spit inside of it. And so that was a symptom that was really intense and scary. And then on top of that, I have TMJ, which is a result, I think it's a result of my scoliosis, where because I have scoliosis, and because my spine is crooked, I think a lot of things in my body are not in alignment. So I've always had issues with my right jaw, like the right side of my jaw where the joint is connected, coming out of alignment. And I've had issues on and off with that for years. So how it relates to this nose issue is that because I was spitting so much for a couple weeks, I think it was like two to 3 weeks that I was just carrying this spit cup with me everywhere. Because I was using my jaw so much to spit, it started aggravating my TMJ flare-ups, and I couldn't eat hard foods anymore. I was only able to eat soft foods. So again, going backwards, like when I explained in the beginning of this story, like, oh, I just had nasal congestion. Some people might have heard that and been like, that's not a big deal, get over it. But no, it was really intense. It was really extreme. I couldn't breathe. I had to spit constantly. I couldn't eat hard foods. I couldn't hear. It was really, really bad. And it was getting progressively worse and worse and worse. And the crazy thing is I couldn't figure out what was causing it. Because like I said, I never had allergies. I never had pollen allergies. I never had cat allergies. I've had cats my entire life, and there's never been a problem. So it would be extremely odd for randomly me to have this extreme allergic reaction to my cats. I've never had food allergies. Very confusing. So fast forward to a couple days ago, even though I was experiencing all these symptoms, I'm a very determined type of person. So I would still go to the gym. I would still go to work. I would just manage my symptoms and still figure out how to make things work. A couple days ago, I went to go walk to the gym, and it wasn't hot outside. It was like 70 degrees outside, which compared to what it's been here in Philadelphia. I mean, we just went through a pretty major heat wave of 90 to 100 degree days. So 70 is actually a really cool day compared to what we had gone through. It's not that far of a walk. I walked slowly. I walked gently. After the 10-minute walk to the gym, I couldn't breathe out of I hadn't been able to breathe out of my nose for a while, but I could barely breathe out of my mouth at this point. I think just the walk I needed more breath. I needed a way to get more air into my body, and my mouth didn't feel like enough at this point. And I don't know what was causing this, but I think well, obviously my nose was causing it, but I mean, I don't know why my mouth wasn't sufficient enough at this point, because it had been for the past 3 weeks. But I think maybe my throat started getting inflamed as well. Like, I think the inflammation started spreading from my nose to my throat. So I think I also was having trouble breathing out of my throat at this point as well. So by the time I got to the gym, and I didn't even start my workout, by the time I got there and I was in this condition, I started losing consciousness. Like, I was blacking out and feeling like I was going to faint. And I have fainted in the past, so I know what that feeling is. And I could tell it was coming on. So I sat down and kind of dealt with it to try to let it pass. I drank some water. And when I got up to try to see, after I recovered from that a little bit and started gaining my consciousness back, to see if I could, try to get my strength back to work out, I noticed that I had a lot of trouble walking. Like, it took a lot of energy just to walk around. And that's when I was like, okay, this is pretty serious. Whatever's going on with me, let me go to the ER. And again, I'm not somebody who rushes to the ER. That's the last thing I want to do. First of all, I try to conserve money, and I know those visits can be extremely expensive. I try to tough out illnesses and still work out and everything. But at this point, I was like, this has been ongoing for 4 months. Maybe something else is going on. So I called an Uber and had the Uber pick me up to take me to the ER. Funny side note about this story, the Uber driver's name was Jesus. So when I called the Uber, I got a notification on my phone and it's like, Jesus is on the way. And I was like, thank God. I was like, I really hope Jesus is on the way and he's going to heal whatever's going on in my body. But anyways, that was a funny side note of the story. It turns out Jesus was a chubby Latina man who looks like he smokes a lot of weed. But anyways, fast forward, I'm not going to tell the story about the hospital because there's other topics I want to get into, but that's like a whole nother story. It was kind of a fun, hilarious hospital experience. But fast forward through the hospital experience, they did all the test work, they did all the blood work, they did x-rays to make sure I didn't have ammonia. They did all these different things, and they came back and they were like, your test work, your blood work and your chest rays all look like very healthy. They're like, you have amazing blood work, you have a good BMI, you don't have anything wrong with your chest, there's literally nothing wrong with you. So if you're having this much trouble breathing at this point, it has to be an allergic reaction to something, and you need to see an allergist to figure out what exactly is causing this allergy so you can not expose yourself to it anymore. And they basically were saying I developed some kind of allergy to something airborne, and that because I didn't know what it was, I'm constantly exposing myself to it and I don't know what it is. So at the end of this, I was almost disappointed because at this point, I almost wanted to have something seriously wrong with me because I was going so crazy trying to figure out what the culprit was. And I couldn't get any answers. So then I did some digging and I hit up one of my friends and I said, I just randomly got sick, and I told him the story and everything like that. And he was like, do you think you might have mold in your new apartment? And I was like, I don't think so. And then I thought about it and I was like, no, because these allergies actually started before I moved into this apartment. So it's not saying there isn't mold in this apartment, but it didn't just start here. The allergy started elsewhere too. So after he said that, he just got me thinking. I'm like, mold. I'm like, where could there possibly be mold? And then something clicked in my head and I was like, oh my God. I was like, I think it's my humidifier. And humidifiers, I had been using it to help me sing because as a singer and a public speaker, podcaster, teacher, etc., I've heard that having a hydrated throat is really essential for proper health of your vocal cords. So I had bought this humidifier and I really thought about it and I was like, wait a second. I'm like, could this thing be growing mold inside of it? I opened it up and I did find some mold spots in there. And I was like, oh my God, I think this whole time this had been my humidifier. And now I don't know for sure yet if that's what's been going on because it's too soon for me to really say that's what it is. I could guarantee you there was mold inside the humidifier. So that is true. I don't know if it's necessarily the mold that was causing all these symptoms, but it's probably very likely. And I'm going to tell you why, because I threw away the humidifier and it's been 3 days and all my symptoms are gone. So, I mean, I think that's pretty telling that that's most likely what it is. I feel like it's too soon for me to really bet that that's the solution, because I feel like I would have to be feeling well for at least 2 to 3 weeks consistently for me to say that was definitely it. But I feel like at this point, I'm like 80 to 90% sure that that was probably it, just because I responded so well to removing the humidifier from my room. But when you think about it, that's crazy. I had been investing in this humidifier as a source to help me, not knowing and being totally uneducated of how much damage that this could have been causing. And if this humidifier really is what's been doing this the whole time, I feel like such an idiot for not thinking of this sooner. But when I really backtrack, it kind of all lines up, because I had been having these symptoms for 4 months and I had bought the humidifier about 5 months ago. So I think probably a month of using it was enough to have mold grow inside it. Now, granted, I did clean the humidifier, but I was totally unaware of how quickly mold can grow inside your humidifier. Apparently, it only takes 3 to 5 days for mold to start growing in there. So there's no way I had been cleaning that thing 3 to 5 days. And also, in addition to that, you can clean the inside of the humidifier, but there's still little pockets inside the humidifier that there's no way to clean. So there's no way to ever know if mold had been growing deep inside the humidifier, because I got my humidifier from Amazon, and on the bottom of it, there's a hole where the water's coming from, and you can clean all the outside components. Like, you can pull it apart and clean the tube and clean everything, but there's this little hole at the bottom that water's coming out of. So that means behind that hole, there was no way to break it apart. If I were to break it apart, I'm sure there's a way, but then I would just break the humidifier. Unless I was some type of technician or something, I would have a hard time putting it back together at that point. So I kind of realized that even if you cleaned it regularly, there's no way to get inside those deep pockets to clean it. So I'm really hoping that this is really the solution to all the issues I had been having, because that would be amazing, because 4 months out of the year, that's 1/3 of the year that I've been sick and not been functioning like a normal human being. So it will be absolutely amazing if this is finally the cure to what's been going on with me. But warning to everybody out there, if you have a humidifier, I recommend being extremely careful with how you clean it. And if you start to feel sick, in my opinion, it's just not worth it. And personally, I will never use a humidifier again for the rest of my life after this experience. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about in response to what had happened with me with my illness is I want to talk about the blessings that come along with chronic illness. I know that sounds crazy, and it might even sound insulting to some people who are going through some serious long-term illnesses that they can't recover from. But I'm talking more so for finding some sort of purpose or silver lining or meaning to go through all that kind of suffering. Because, I don't know, me personally, I would drive myself crazy if I didn't try my best to find some sort of positive result of going through that suffering. First and foremost, I would say that going through the suffering for that long really humbles you. I'm somebody that, if I'm not careful, I can definitely err on the side of arrogance, meaning I'm a very hardworking person. I'm very serious about what I do and what I put forward. And sometimes I will admit that makes me lean a little bit into arrogance. Not on purpose. I don't purposely want to be arrogant, but I just kind of catch myself sometimes judging people that aren't taking care of themselves, if that makes sense. How this experience humbled me was because I was doing everything I possibly could to take care of myself to the best of my ability. Now, in hindsight, I was an idiot for not thinking of the humidifier any sooner, but because that thought hadn't crossed my mind at that point, I was controlling everything I possibly could, and I still wasn't getting any better. So having gone through that experience of having no control over finding the solution to this problem really humbled me, because now I kind of look around me, and instead of judging the people that I'm seeing that aren't doing well in life, that aren't taking care of their health, that aren't taking care of their financial situation, that aren't in a healthy relationship and don't have any plans to exit that situation. I used to really judge people like that, but now I'm kind of looking at them that, let me pick one of those specific people so I can make an analogy. So let's say I'm talking specifically about somebody who is mentally unwell. They're mentally ill and they're not really doing anything to change their circumstance. Well, maybe their mental illness is so severe that they can't control it, that they can't do anything to change their circumstance. For example, I'm somebody who has suffered with mental illness, but I also am very proactive about it. I've gotten therapy. I've gone on different medications to try to help myself. So being in that position, I would sometimes judge other people who were suffering with mental illness but not doing anything about it. But now, after going through this experience, maybe there's people with mental illness that they have tried to do stuff to remedy their situation and nothing worked for them. Because again, I was sick for so long and every attempt I was making wasn't working. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe all these people I'm judging, maybe I'm judging them too harshly. Maybe some of these people actually really are doing their best and trying their best to remedy their situations, and they're doing the best with what they can. I mean, granted, I'm sure some of that's not true. Some of these people probably aren't doing their best, I'm sure. But regardless, it just kind of softened me up just a little bit more to the possibility that maybe not everybody who is in a bad physical place has control over their situation. Number 2, another thing I really gained in perspective from being sick for this long was it made me more compassionate to other people. Like I was saying before, I tend to lean a little bit in arrogance. I also tend to lean sometimes in selfishness, meaning not intentional selfishness, not like I don't care about other people around me, but I'm somebody who gets lost in my own head. So when I'm out in public, there might be a situation where there's an elderly woman who needs help opening the door, and I might totally bypass that, not intentionally, but just because I'm so lost in my own head and what's going on in my life and in my world that I'm failing to notice anything else that's going on around me. So basically being sick for that long, what it's done for me was it made me more aware of my surroundings, and it made me more aware of the suffering that other people are going through. And by having that awareness of other people around me who might also be suffering, it kind of opened me up to paying more attention to other people's needs. So now when I'm out in public and I catch myself kind of rushing through my day and moving forward without stopping to let an elderly person pass by and instead of just rushing ahead of them because I have a place to go, I've just noticed that being sick for this long has made me more compassionate towards the people suffering, because I had suffered for so long that I felt for them more. And it's interesting. I'm kind of just people watching and observing around me that so many different people are going through so many different things. And I'm also noticing other people around me who were like me before, that they're on their way to work and they're more concerned with their own inner world and not really looking around them. And I'm trying not to judge them because I was that person too. But what I'm saying is now I'm just kind of really looking around me and people watching more and paying attention to the people that might need help and doing my best to insert myself in situations where I think somebody needs help, rather than just ignoring it or passively observing it without trying to help people, if that makes sense. So I feel like that's definitely something that came up from illness, is this newfounded compassion for people that I didn't feel like I really had before. The third thing that I put on my list, I compiled a little list for you guys so that I could keep it more organized, because I tend to be a rambler. So since I'm going to be focusing on solo podcasts for a while I save up for a new computer, I want to be more organized with my thoughts. So the third thing on here that I wrote that I learned from being sick for this long was letting go of resistance and control and accepting my mortality. I know the third thing probably sounds like a negative thing, accepting my mortality, but unless you've felt ill for so long, I feel like it's not going to make sense, but I'm going to try to explain it the best I can. You eventually reach a point where you feel so sick that the idea of living, it's going to sound so morbid, but let me just explain it. I'm sorry if this sounds extremely morbid. I had reached a point where I was actually praying to God. I was like, God, I cannot live like this for the rest of my life. So please have a plan for me. Either take my life because I can't live like this, or please help me heal. But either way, please don't keep me like this. I can't just stay like this. This is crazy. I can't live like this. So it's kind of interesting. You sort of accept your mortality, and you learn to let go of resistance of your mortality. And the reason I think that's a good thing, it sounds like a negative thing in the way I explained it, but in hindsight, now that I'm recovered, I feel like a lot of anxious thoughts and a lot of control issues stem from a fear of the unknown. So I feel like when you reach such a low point of your physical health that you're accepting, like, okay, death could be a possibility at this point because I feel so sick that I know I can't possibly live on like this. It's sort of, now that I'm feeling better and I'm coming back to it and living my life, I just feel, again, going back to the humility, I just feel sort of humbled about not having control over everything anymore, and just accepting, like, I can only show up and control what I could, and I can only do the best that I possibly can, but everything else is out of my control. You know what I mean? Like, I showed up for myself. I remedied whatever I could by myself. I took myself to the doctors. I stopped engaging in unhealthy habits, and I'm still not better. So like, the control's out of my hands. I don't know what to say. So there's something about that now that I am doing better, that I'm able to utilize that in other ways of my life. So for example, when little stressors happen, like last week, my bike got stolen. So I had some theft issues in Philadelphia. My car was stolen. And a couple weeks ago, my bike was stolen. I was using one of those wire locks, which I assumed were designed to be strong enough to not be cut by wire cutters. But apparently they're not designed that well. The police told me that the safest possible lock for your bike is a U-lock. And apparently chains aren't that safe either, that they can be, usually, most likely, they can be hit with a hammer. So U-locks are your best bet. But anyways, that's besides the point. The point I'm getting with the bike is, bringing it back to letting go of resistance, I feel like maybe the before me might have told myself a sob story about that situation. I might have been like, why me? Everything bad always happens to me. My car was stolen. Now my bike was stolen. It's like my life is cursed. Like, you know, that negative self-talk. And I think it just happened. And I was like, okay, what's the next step? Like, I didn't really have any emotional attachment to it at all. I was just like, okay, bike was stolen. What's the next step? And I controlled what I could. I did whatever I could. I called the cops. I filed a police report, and then I filed an insurance claim, and I got a little money back. And granted, that was a $700 bike, and my insurance policy wasn't that great. There was a deductible, and I was only able to get like about $100 back. But that's it. I did what I could, and the rest is history. There's nothing I can do except keep moving on. I hear this phrase in different places: control what you can and let go of the rest. So as long as you know you've done your part, there's nothing else you could really do but what you know how to do. You know what I mean? And you can educate yourself on trying to learn what to do next. But once you've done what you could, you've done what you could, and the rest is out of your control. I've learned this in 12-step programs. I've done 12-step programs. I'm currently doing a 12-step programs, and that's a slogan they say a lot in the program. Control what you can, let go of the rest. And I've also heard this same phrase used a lot in Stoic philosophy. I don't know exactly which philosopher was the one who possibly coined this. It might have been Marcus Aurelius. It might have been somebody else. I'm not sure. But I know in Stoic philosophy, that is also a slogan, is control what you can, let go of the rest. And I feel like, tying this all back to what I talked about in the beginning, I feel like getting ill really, really, truly helped me apply that and learn that very quickly. Okay, last, The fourth thing that I feel that I learned, and a new perspective that I gained from being chronically ill for that long, was I have a radical gratitude for very tiny things in life. For example, when I had that chronic inflamed nose and my nose was blocked for that long, I wanted to sneeze so bad. I hadn't felt what a sneeze felt like in so long. And something as simple and stupid as a sneeze, you take for granted that your body does. It's just a natural reflex. But when your body isn't doing its natural reflexes, you miss them. It sounds so strange, but I remember when I finally started getting better, I had one sneeze, and it was the first sneeze I remembered having in a long time, and I actually started crying. I was like, oh my God. And I started saying, thank you, God, for letting me sneeze. Please help me sneeze more. I know that sounds so crazy, but you really take for granted how your body functions as a harmonious, how your organs and everything are harmoniously functioning together when you're healthy. You don't think about it. You just live your life healthy. And then when you lose that harmony in your body and something's not right, you miss those little things that your body does. It's so hard to explain. Also, when you recover and you could finally go out and do little things that you couldn't do before, you have this newfound appreciation for them, for the things that you missed. So yesterday I went out and I got myself a decaf cappuccino with oat milk at a coffee shop, and I hadn't done that for so long. I didn't have the energy to do that for so long. Before, all I could really do is get the things I had to do done, and then I couldn't wait to just go home and be in my bathtub or be in bed. That's all I really wanted to do. But when I finally felt good enough to go get a cup of coffee and drink it, it was like I was fully immersed in that experience of, I can almost cry just talking about it. It sounds crazy, but I felt so fully immersed in that experience of just like looking at the beautiful coffee shop and the decorations in the coffee shop and seeing the people, meet up and friends meet up and talk, and just the environment, just living life and being in an environment that is positive. And I don't even know how to explain it. I feel like I'm sounding so crazy right now, but I think that's what I mean by you just get this new gratitude that you didn't have before, because certain things like that, when you just take those things for granted, when you take the health of your body for granted and you just go out and live life, you don't really realize how special everything is, if that makes sense. I don't know. It's so hard for me to put in words, but it's just like somebody built this coffee shop, like somebody put the work into creating this coffee shop and making it a beautiful environment and took care of it and brewed this coffee. And this was all built off of somebody's dream. And like you like start to really feel and see those things more when you start to have gratitude for life, and you're not really trapped in the hustle and bustle of everyday bullshit, like with things that you're angry with your boss. And sometimes it takes like having all that ripped away from you for you to come back and appreciate it, if that makes sense, what I'm saying. Now, that's my list that I wrote. Those are the 4 things that I feel like I gained in perspective after being sick for that long. Now, one of my biggest fears, and I think this is a common thing amongst the human experience, is that I'm afraid that I'm going to get healthy again and that I'm just going to forget everything I learned. It's kind of like, you ever see a really good movie and you feel like profoundly affected and it changes you in some kind of way, and then just like the next day you start acting like an asshole again. So I'm kind of afraid that I'm just going to get better and that I'm just going to forget everything I learned. So another thing I think that is a product of the Stoic philosophy is taking daily record of yourself and daily inventory of yourself, which is also an element in the 12-step programs as well. It's interesting. There's a lot of similarities, oddly enough, because people associate the 12-step program as religious, but from my experience, it's actually not religious at all, because one of the things that they say in the program is have faith to a higher power it doesn't have to be religious. So your higher power could literally, you just get to create what you think your higher power is. And if you're an atheist, you could literally say that your higher power is yourself. Well, actually, maybe you can't say yourself, but you could literally say, you could say that music, like, okay, let's say you're a musician and you're an atheist and you don't believe in God, but what is something bigger than yourself that you can identify as something that pulls you out of the human experience? You could just say music. That's all you have to say. You know what I mean? So in my experience, I don't think the 12-step program is as religious as people think. Maybe it used to be, and maybe that's why I might be misinformed about that. But the modern day ones that I've gone to, I feel like don't emphasize on strict, religious talk. But anyways, where I'm going with that was a side tangent. Let me stay focused here. I feel that I'm noticing a lot of parallels between Stoic philosophy and the 12-step program, which is super interesting. But where this ties in is that I want to continue to take that daily inventory of myself to try to stay humble. So maybe every day at the end of the day, kind of reflect and say, okay, what did I do today? Where was I acting out of character? What was I doing well? That sort of thing. I think it's important to check in with yourself because, again, once you start feeling good again, and you might forget about everything you learned when things were bad. So I think it's really important to have those daily check-ins. Okay, I have a couple more topics I want to discuss on my podcast today. The next one is when I was dealing with that stuffy nose, I learned a lot of remedies to deal with it. So I want to share them for people who struggle with allergies or even a common cold or COVID or whatever. And keep in mind that these remedies are specifically for people with what's called allergic rhinitis, which is inflammation and blockage of the nasal passages. So when I say stuffy nose, by the way, the more medical term would be allergic rhinitis, which is inflammation of the nasal passage and also blocked sinuses. And that could actually have different levels as well. You can have a sinus infection, you can have sinusitis, there's different things that can go on, but in a nutshell, inflamed nasal passage and blocked sinuses are these remedies are specifically for these things. So the first thing is a nasal spray. There's a lot of different nasal sprays which are going to do different things. The one that specifically worked for me, which was recommended by my ENT doctor, was, and pardon me if I'm mispronouncing this, fluticasone propionate. I'm going to say it again in case I'm mispronouncing this, but it's fluticasone propionate. It's 50 milligrams. It is a steroid nasal spray, so you don't want to overdose on this. Not that overdosing would necessarily kill you, but because it's a steroid, there are negative health consequences that could come as a result of overusing a steroid. So per the doctor's request, you're only supposed to use this twice a day max, and you want to stick to only 1 to 2 sprays per nostril each time you do it. So I would say that's a maximum of 4 sprays per day. I would do mine once in the morning and once before bed so I could sleep through the night. And I would spray 2 sprays in each nostril each time that I took a dose. And I was able to get this medication right over the counter at CVS. So I don't even think you need a doctor's prescription for this. So if you're struggling with nasal stuffiness, you can get this all on your own without having to go to the doctors. The next thing I did to alleviate the symptoms was using what's called a neti pot, which is a little pot of warm water with saline solution. Saline is a type of salt solution, but you want to make sure you get actual saline solution already prepared because you don't know what the effects could be of using home salt. It might be fine, but just to be on the safe side, you're better off buying actual medical saline solution that is designed for this. And for those who don't know what a neti pot is, it's that little pot of warm water in the saline solution, and you pour it inside one of your nostrils while tipping your head to the other side and letting the water come out the other nostril, and then repeating it on the other side. I'm going to warn you guys, the first time I did this, it was almost a traumatic experience because I'm not used to having water come out of my nose. I'm sure if you're a swimmer or you're in the water a lot, this might be a sensation that you're already comfortable with. But the first time I did it, I was like, there's no way I could do this every day. But I promise you, by the third day, it actually felt like nothing and I could do it. So if you're really struggling with severe nose allergy symptoms and sinus issues and rhinitis and whatnot, it's so worth getting over the initial hump of the discomfort. It might actually, and it could just be me that I struggled with the discomfort of this because maybe other people have already had experience with this and we're fine. But I'm telling you, for anybody who struggles with the discomfort, just deal with it for 2 or 3 days. And I promise you, it'll get easier by the third day. Now I'm like excited to have water come out of my nose. I know that sounds so weird, but you just get used to it and it actually starts to feel really good and soothing after a few days. The next thing I did was I switched my diet to a diet that thins out mucus because, again, if you have sinus congestion and nasal congestion, there's a backup of fluid trapped in your sinuses that can't come out because your nose is so blocked and inflamed. So either it doesn't come out, and that's when you get serious sinus infections and sinus pressure and headaches, or if it does come out, it comes out through your throat, which is called post-nasal drip, which is what had been happening to me personally. So if you thin your mucus out, you might have a better chance of it coming out of your nose if it's not thick. So what I focused on was first of all, I can't list all of it here. You might want to, maybe when this video is over, do your own research on what's going to thin out mucus, especially if you have any specific dietary restrictions. You don't want to just listen to what I'm saying because you might be somebody with allergies, or you're on a special vegan diet, or whatever. You might have special things that you need to do, but I can just speak generically and anecdotally for what worked for me. I temporarily cut out dairy because from the research I've done from being a vocal coach is that dairy supposedly thickens your mucus. Now, I've never looked at any professional studies necessarily about this, so I don't know if this is just an old wives' tale, but from what I understand, dairy products are known to thicken your mucus. So keep in mind, I love dairy. I love yogurt. I love ice cream. I love cheese. I love butter. So I don't expect anybody to permanently cut out dairy from their diet. If you love dairy, absolutely don't think you have to give it up forever. I'm just talking a temporary solution to get you through this hump of your allergy flare up so that you can thin out your mucus. So it's just a temporary thing. I cannot wait to go back to eating dairy, but I'm keeping it cool for a while. Once I feel like I've been good for at least a month, then I'll feel comfortable going back to eating dairy. Another thing is I started incorporating a lot of different spices and herbs, fresh spices and fresh herbs in my cooking. Again, you have to be sure that this is appropriate for your diet. So don't take everything I'm saying as if it's the right thing for you. Like, for example, if you have acid reflux, there's certain spices that you can't have because it'll trigger acid reflux. But assuming you're just a normal, healthy person who can tolerate anything in your diet, I incorporated a lot of fresh rosemary, a lot of fresh parsley, a lot of fresh ginger in my cooking and in my teas. I would brew fresh ginger and honey tea. Celery. Anything that I felt would stimulate those spices that would just stimulate making my nose run. And a lot of it worked. A lot of it really did help a lot. I also drank a lot of soups, a lot of warm soups, because I feel that the liquid would help flush out my nose and help me activate my nose from working again and not being dry all the time. I drank a lot of water and I drank a lot of tea. And the two main teas I had, first of all, I always put honey in each tea that I drank, ginger and honey. And the two teas that I cycled between, one was a eucalyptus-based tea called Breathe Right. And the other was a tea called Throat Coat that is designed for throat issues. I personally wasn't having as many throat issues, so I would more so use the eucalyptus Breathe Right tea, but I would kind of cycle between these two. Also, supposedly garlic and pineapple thin out your mucus, but I didn't personally incorporate these as much in my diet, but I did read that they do. So that might be something to consider. Also, in general, I made sure that I tried to just get a lot of vitamins and nutrients in my diet overall. I started taking vitamins to eliminate the possibility of any vitamin deficiencies. I started taking additional vitamins that I thought would help the usual deficiencies. When I say the usual deficiencies, I mean if you're somebody who can't afford to get fancy blood work done because it's expensive, the most common deficiencies that I'm aware of from the things I've read in my life are zinc, magnesium, and B12. So what I did personally was I got a regular multivitamin to cover all the different vitamins, and then I additionally got zinc, magnesium, and vitamin B12 to supplement for those very commonly diagnosed vitamin deficiencies. I also got a cod liver oil, and I got the actual oil, not the capsules, because I have always used cod liver fish oil, the actual oil, my whole life. And I've always found that if I was dealing with any inflammation issues, that it would help me. There's also a lot of research done about cod liver oil and the omegas in it helping with inflammation issues. Now, I don't know, my results of feeling less inflamed with the cod liver oil might just be a placebo effect because I read about it. But either way, I just feel like it doesn't hurt because at this point I've read enough about cod liver fish oil that I think it's not a bad idea to put it in your diet if you're able to. I mean, obviously, if you're a vegan and you don't, or a vegetarian or whatever, and you don't eat fish, then it might not work for you. But if you can eat it, it's not a bad idea. Another thing I did was I started taking my drinking water more seriously because water is, you're supposed to hydrate when you're having allergy issues. You're supposed to hydrate all the time. But a big function of water besides hydrating is to help flush out toxins out of your body. So you want to make sure you're getting healthy drinking water, because if you're trying to flush toxins out, you don't want to be adding more toxins in. So I looked at my current filter and I didn't realize that this whole time my water filter, it was a Brita filter, wasn't even functioning properly. It was the filter wasn't correctly fitting inside the Brita filter. And the water was just coming out really quickly and not even passing through the filter. And I had been totally blind to this and unaware of this until I inspected it when I started considering it. So you might want to do a little inspection of your water filter to see if it's functioning properly. Some people go with bottles of water, but personally, I'm thinking about budget right now. So, and also some people might not like the plastic because there's also issues with, taking in plastic. And there's also issues if you're really concerned about environmental health. A lot of people are not big fans of bottled water, but whatever your method is, try your absolute best to get good drinking water. Don't just drink straight up tap water. Even though the levels are apparently good and not toxic, there's no way to avoid toxins, period. Like even bottled water, you're going to get some of that plastic. Even filtered water, you can't filter out everything, but you can do the best you can. So if you already have a Brita filter, check it, see if it needs to be changed, see if it's even functioning properly. Because I looked at mine and I realized that for probably the past year, it had not been functioning properly. So I actually switched to a new brand altogether called Zero Water. And I found that when I put the water in it, it would come out really slowly instead of quickly. So I'm like, okay, I know it's doing something, and I could taste a difference as well. So yeah, definitely invest in making sure your water is clean. My next tip for dealing with allergies is specifically nasal rhinitis and sinus issues. It might sound counterintuitive, but exercise. I know that sounds crazy, but for me, and of course, you want to only manage what you can. And if you get to a place where you're in so much pain that you feel like you're going to faint, obviously don't exercise. But if you're still able to function and you're still able to walk around and go to work, if you can handle at least minimal exercise, in my opinion, you should. Because I feel like when we have allergies, our bodies feel sick and our first intuition is like, I'm sick, time to lay down. But actually laying down is horrible for draining out sinuses. Personally, what I found was that getting up and moving my body and sweating helped release toxins from my body. And if somebody who's listening now didn't hear the beginning of my story, I ended up having to go to the emergency room because my allergies got so bad that I couldn't breathe and I was losing consciousness. When they did all the testing, all my blood work came out perfectly fine and healthy. Now, sometimes sinus issues can lead to infections, which could get really severe, which could even lead to things such as meningitis. And personally, I think the reason that I didn't get to that point is because I controlled whatever I could to make sure my body was healthy and would fight off infection if it came. So that's why I think exercising is such a good component to all of that, because by sweating is a great way to release toxins out of your body. So whatever is getting trapped in your body, if it's not coming out through your nose, some of it might come out through your sweat. Now, again, you want to take that advice with a grain of salt, because if you're so ill that you might faint or pass out from exercise, then obviously that's not a possibility. But if you can try it out and you can handle it, definitely exercise, even if it's just as something as a walk or getting up and doing a bunch of housework, I sometimes find is enough. Just get your body moving and try to work up a little bit of a sweat. My next advice for dealing with nasal allergies is, if you're going to be coming in contact with the thing that is going to trigger your allergies, so for example, pollen, etc., I recommend wearing a face mask to minimize the possibility of you breathing in those air pollutants. Now, obviously, a face mask isn't going to eliminate very tiny particles. They're going to be getting inside your body regardless. But at the very least, I would imagine that wearing a face mask in the face of pollen or whatever else might be irritating you would not be a bad idea. Personally, what I was going through, I was unaware of what the irritant was, and I found out that it's most likely mold from a humidifier. So me wearing a face mask in public really didn't do anything, because I don't think there was anything in public that was causing my allergies. But because I didn't know at the time what was causing the allergies, I just thought it was a good idea. So if you're especially somebody that knows that, for example, it's pollen causing the allergies, if you have to go outside, it's probably not a bad idea to wear a face mask. And trust me, in today's climate, nobody's going to think you're crazy for doing that. They're probably just going to think you're afraid of COVID. So you won't look weird or unusual for doing it. You'll actually fit in. I feel like if it was 10 years ago, I would have been too embarrassed to wear a face mask in public. I feel like it would have gotten a lot of attention. But I feel like nowadays it's just the norm. So I don't think it's strange at all. My last tip on how to deal with nasal allergies is pay attention to your air quality. Now, I learned the hard way that it is not a good idea to have a humidifier. If you're not able to appropriately take care of the cleaning, it could build mold and actually aggravate things more. So personally, I don't recommend using an air humidifier. I think it's going to make things worse. But I do recommend using an air purifier, which is designed to suck in air pollutants and dust mites and whatnot. So I think having clean quality air in your home living space is a great idea. You want to especially focus on your bedroom, because when you think about it, you spend 1/3 of the day in your bedroom sleeping. I don't know if I did the math on that correctly. I think it's 1/3, right? Yeah, about 1/3 of the day in your bedroom. So obviously that's where you're going to want to put most of the work. But if it's possible and you have the time to, you want to try to dust and clean your surfaces every day, for especially if you're somebody who is sensitive to dust mite allergies or even pollen allergies, because you can go outside and not realize that you're getting it on your clothes, and then it can get in your house. Another thing you want to do to make your air quality a little better, and this might also sound counterintuitive if you're afraid of outdoor allergies, but you actually want to keep your window open sometimes, not all the time, but you don't want things in your environment to fester and get nasty and build up. So by keeping your window open sometimes, it kind of helps eliminate things from building up, because it lets new things come into your house and it helps you air out things to get out of your house. But again, that's only going to work if you're keeping up with the dusting and the cleaning and the vacuuming. And if you have pets, you want to regularly try to vacuum off the furniture or do whatever you have to do to get fur off the furniture. Also, I'm just going to add this in now, but an obvious solution to this is to find out what you're allergic to specifically. So for me, it took a lot of trial and error, but if you have enough money, go to an allergist because they can help you get to the root cause of your allergy issues. So that way you don't have to do extra work. If you're, in my case, I had to cover all grounds because I had no idea what was causing the issue. But if you have enough money and you can afford, or a good insurance plan, and you can afford to see an allergist to get allergy testing, you might want to just do that directly, so to avoid all the extra work of trying to figure it out by yourself. Okay, so we're reaching towards the end of the podcast. I only have one last topic that I want to discuss with my listeners today, and that topic is how to effectively deal with haters. Now, I feel like the word haters could be a little bit nebulous, so to be more specific about it, I'm talking about people in your life who, when you're succeeding in something, are not happy for you, or even furthermore, they might intentionally try to derail you from your success by different tactics, talking you out of doing the things that you want to do, discrediting you, etc. There's all different manipulative tactics people can use to try to deter you from your path of success. These people could be random strangers. When I say strangers, I mean more acquaintances, like somebody at your gym that you're not close friends with, etc. They could be close family, and they could be friends. So, or people in your work life or social circles, etc. I think you guys get the point of what I'm saying. But the reason I wanted to bring up this topic is because personally, I'm somebody who's always been very sensitive to the idea of haters, especially when they're people who are close to me, like close family and friends. And what I mean by sensitive is that I would really let it get to me, and I would let the idea of somebody who I thought was supposed to support me not being happy for my success, I would let that eat me alive and make me very angry, very bitter, very resentful. And before you know it, I'm not even enjoying the fruits of my own success because I'm spending way too much time of the day upset thinking about how this person was trying to hurt me. And I'm not talking about any specific person. I mean, hypothetically, I'm thinking about my history and my experience with haters. My experience has always been a negative reaction to it. The reason I'm bringing this up now is because I feel like as I'm aging, I'm finally starting to get a grip on how to deal with this appropriately. So I want to share my insight with the listeners, or for anybody listening, so they can, who knows, maybe it could help them and they could apply it to their life as well. Also, I want to add that the reason this topic is even coming up for me right now is because recently I just did a full body transformation, where I might do a whole separate video on this body transformation and what I did to achieve that, but that's for another time. So long story short, last year I went from about 120 pounds and I gained weight all the way up to 150 pounds. And while I actually did like some of the weight gain, and I thought some of that weight was actually very healthy for me because I may have been slightly underweight before, I realized I was starting to reach a point where the weight was just gradually going on. And I knew that if I kept going down the path I was, that before you know it, it would have gotten to 160 and 170, etc. So I think for me, 150 was the place where I was like, all right, I need to change this. So I set a goal. Again, I liked some of the weight gain, so I didn't want to lose all the weight. I set a goal to go down to 135 pounds. I'm not completely done with the goal. I'm only about 3 to 4 pounds away from 135 pounds. Right now, I'm kind of teetering between 138 and 139 pounds. But nevertheless, I've lost 11 pounds and I've reduced my body fat immensely and put on a lot more muscle. So if I were to even stop here and not reach 135, to me, that would actually be a very successful body transformation, because I brought my body fat percentage from 35% down to 24%. So I'm very happy with where I'm at right now. And anyways, I said I didn't want to go on a tangent with that. I'll do that on a different video. I'm bringing that up because what I've noticed, and this is something I'm familiar with because, again, like I said earlier, I'm very sensitive to the idea of haters and getting my feelings hurt and feeling distraught when I don't feel like people are cheering me on. So this isn't new to me. I kind of already expected this. But what I'm noticing is the reaction I'm getting in public sometimes from people is a lot different than the reaction I was getting when I was 150 pounds. When I was 150 pounds, I felt like I kind of just blended in. I looked like a normal person. I didn't have as much confidence. I didn't necessarily hate myself. I still loved myself, but I didn't walk up straight with my shoulders back, if that makes sense. I kind of slouched a little bit and was slightly more self-conscious about some of the weight I had put on, and I didn't have that same air of confidence about myself. Now, I've noticed as I've been transforming my body and becoming more of what I like, I just carry myself differently now. When I go out, I feel more sure of myself. And I've noticed the effects that has on people around you isn't always what you'd think. Some people gravitate to it and some people like it, but some people are very threatened by it. And you can just see this in tiny interactions with the looks you get from people, with the scowls you get from people. Like, okay, I'll give a small example to explain really quickly. At the gym the other day, I noticed the janitor at the gym was giving me dirty looks and scowls and eyeing me up the whole time. It was very weird, but I noticed it. He was kind of following me around and doing his job, but just like looking my body up and down, eyeballing me and giving me dirty looks. It was like he just had his eye on me. Then at one point, I went to deadlift a hand weight, the ones that you just hold in your hand. But anyways, I went to go pick up a 70-pound hand weight, and I pulled it from the rack. And what I noticed was that I was able to pick it up and deadlift it. But when I went to go put it back, I literally couldn't put it back. And I think the reason was when I pulled it, I could kind of just like let the weight kind of not fall on the ground, but I was able to kind of like move with the weight. But when I lifted it up, it was almost like my arm strength wasn't strong enough to put it back up, but my leg strength was enough to put it back down, to pull it down initially. I know that sounds crazy, but if you experience it, you'll know what I'm talking about. When I was done with the deadlifting and I went to go put the weight back, I couldn't get it up. So I just what I did was I brought the weight as close as I possibly could to the spot it belonged. And I left it there, not intentionally. Like, I understand that there's something called gym etiquette where people leave their weights lying around, where people, they leave things all over the place, or they go to squat on the squat rack and they leave their weights on the rack. There are genuinely rude things people do. But he had been watching me and keeping his eye on me, and it was really obvious that I was not leaving a weight lying around. If I had been lazy and leaving a weight lying around, I would have just left it where I was doing my workout. But no, I brought it as close as I possibly could to where it belonged. I couldn't get it up, so I left it on the floor, literally 1 inch away from it where it belonged. And that's what I did. And he came up to me very aggressively, the janitor. Now, I would have given him the benefit of the doubt if he just saw me do it. But I'm telling you, human beings are smart and intuitive. Like, we're all very intuitive creatures. And I could feel him hating me well before I did that. So it was like he was waiting for his chance to yell at me. And there he got his chance. And he came up to me and he was like, "Ma'am, you can't leave that weight there." And I calmly tried to explain to him what was going on. I'm like, "I'm really sorry. I didn't intend to leave that weight there." I was like, "I literally can't get it back up." I feel like any normal person, when they heard that explanation, they would be like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry. I'll help you get it back up. Next time, just ask me," etc. But he just jumped to like, "Well, then you shouldn't lift it." Like, he just was like very aggressively at me. And again, going backwards, I know this might sound arrogant, but I really think it's because I walked into the gym with confidence and I looked good. And from my perspective, it seems like this guy, he was a janitor, so he was probably like, "Oh, this girl, this bitch, she thinks she looks good, so she can do whatever she wants around here." It just, to me, from my perspective, it really felt like that's what was happening. Again, I don't know what it's in this guy's head, so I can't prove this, but I just, like what I was saying before, I feel like the human intuition is strong, and I just felt those vibes off of him before it even started. So anyways, that's a side tangent. Let me get back to what I was initially saying. The whole point I'm bringing that up is because when you're starting to do well and you're starting to achieve things that you want to achieve, you would think that everybody would be cheering you on, but you're going to get a mix of love and hate from people. you're going to get both extremes more. You're going to get a lot of love and cheering from people, but with that, simultaneously, a lot of hate and jealousy and anger from people. So what I wanted to discuss today was, this is something that always used to upset me. And as I'm getting older, I'm finding I'm able to detach myself more from it and keep doing what I have to do. So I wrote a list of 3 tips to help people with this issue if they are also very sensitive and get their feelings hurt easily at the idea of people not supporting them. The first tip I wrote here is stop telling people what you're doing. I know that for me, that's a tough one, because I think the reason people even get themselves in a situation where they feel hurt is because when they first initially break into something successful, like they recorded their own album, or they had a desire to lose weight and they had been struggling and they finally lost the weight, whatever your specific goal is. I feel like a newbie they want to go around and parade this because they're proud of themselves and they want to get that love and cheer and validation and support from people, which I think is a normal and healthy thing. Now, again, you don't want to brag necessarily, but you just want to feel like, I did it. I mean, really at the core of it, it's like, mommy, look, I did it. Mommy, daddy, look, be proud. Like, that's really what it is at the core. But as I've gotten older, I found that it's not that you can't ever show these parts of you. So for example, in my situation where I lost weight, I mean, people are going to see. It's not like you can't be yourself and you can't show up, or it's not even like you can't post it on social media as a way to inspire other people who want to achieve the same thing. So you can do those things, sure. But as far as going to individual people and talking about your success or your plans for success, this also goes for people who have a goal or a vision in mind. Actually, maybe even especially so, especially for people who have a goal or a vision in mind and they want to share that excitement with people around them. My recommendation is don't. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but in my opinion, I think it's best just to work silently, because again, you might show these things on social media, or you might just show up in life and people happen to notice the things you've attained. But when you go to people personally and privately, one-on-one, and tell them your plans, then you're giving them a direct access to try to deter you from your success. Now, some of these people might even try to do that without you talking to them about it, but I found that at the very least, don't even bother telling things for people. If you want to quit your 9-to-5 job and start your own business, don't tell your parents, don't tell your friends, you can maybe tell your significant other, but even sometimes depending on the health of that marriage or relationship, that might not be a good idea. If that's the case, you shouldn't be in that relationship. But regardless, I recommend not really telling much people at all. Just work silently. And when you achieve the thing you achieve, they're just going to see it and they're going to have to deal with it. But in the process, don't just keep it privately. It's hard because when you're excited about something, it only makes sense to want to have love and support. But unfortunately, it's very rare to find people who will support you. And if you do have friends and family who do support you, cherish them like gold, because they are very rare. My second tip for this is to learn how to detach yourself emotionally completely in a stoic kind of way. Now, I know that's obviously a lot easier said than done, and it took me years to be able to start doing this. But if you have trouble with this, I would recommend not starting with detaching yourself emotionally from friends and family with this. Just accept if you're angry and hurt by lack of support from friends and family, that might not be a good place to start. But where could be a good place to start is strangers and mental ruminations. So, for example, if you're somebody who, let's say you start a new project and you kind of have like PTSD in your brain about, well, in the past, this girl didn't support me. My best friend tried to take me down. And I'm speaking from my own experience. I'm somebody who, I struggle with like PTSD type symptoms. And when I'm about to do something, I'm already aware of the threats before they arrive. If you're somebody who tends to ruminate like I do, like, I just recently lost weight. In my head, I might have a rumination like, oh my God, the last time I tried to lose weight, this bitch tried to hurt me. The first thing you want to do is maybe because these people may not be present in your life anymore. If you can't start with present situations, you could at least start with past situations and ruminations. So what I did was every time I have a rumination about a potential threat based on an event that happened in the past like that, I'll just stop and say out loud, I see you, I acknowledge you, I see you there. And I find just the act of saying, I see you, you're ruminating, I see you're doing it, it kind of pulls you out of it. And it's funny, sometimes the brain just goes into autopilot and does it automatically, and you don't know it and you're not aware of it. But practicing that awareness, I think, is a huge step to changing the habit and learning how to detach emotionally. Now, the next step after that has been helping me is now applying it to real life situations. And to me, the easiest place to start is with strangers. So for example, going back to that example I gave about the guy at the gym, the janitor who was following me around. I don't know this guy. I don't care about this guy. He's a hater that means nothing to me. So there's no reason I need to attach myself emotionally to how this person perceives me. So I feel like in the past, just any type of energy like that was getting thrown at me with hate, I would be so offended by. But nowadays, I'm really just calmly observing and calmly defending. So, for example, the other day, I made a phone call to make a doctor's appointment for an allergist. When the lady answered the phone, she answered the phone with, "Hello, Asthma Institute," or whatever it was called. I don't want to call out any specific names because I don't know. So I'm just like hypothetical. I'm calling it Asthma Institute. She's like, "Hello, Asthma Institute." And I was like, "Hi, I just want to double check. You guys do allergies, right?" And she kind of responded with like "We are an allergist, like duh." Like she didn't say duh, but you could just feel the vibe and the energy. It was kind of like she was being a bitch, you know? I feel like the older me would have barked back and just gotten nasty back to try to defend myself because I was very sensitive to that hatred coming towards me. But instead, I just kind of, it's not that you can't defend yourself. You can defend yourself, but I just did it with a neutral emotional response. I wasn't fakely nice to her. I was just very neutral. "Oh, I'm sorry. When you answered the phone, you only said asthma, so I wasn't sure if that also was inclusive of allergies." I just said it really simple. No nasty tone back, no overly friendly tone back. And she kind of just calmed down. She was like, "Oh yeah." She was like, "That makes sense." Like she just kind of chilled out after that. In that situation, that was a good place to start in practice. Rather than me thinking like it was all about me, this lady probably deals with idiots all day long. So she probably already is stuck in her own, everybody's just stuck in their own head and their own ruminations and their own issues and their own lives. So whatever is going on in their head, sometimes that hatred has nothing to do with you. And even going back to the janitor guy I was talking about, maybe he's been taken, he had a crush on a woman who was in good shape that I reminded him of, and it just triggered negative memories, and he took all that anger and aggression out of me. There's no way that me moving that weight 2 inches away from where it belonged as best as I possibly could to my ability triggered all that rage in him. That all that rage came from somewhere else. So once you start being aware of that and practicing this with strangers to observe and not to react emotionally, but just not emotionally, it then becomes easier to transfer that sentiment and energy towards family as well. So now I apply those same thoughts to family and friends and people like that. I'm like, okay, if something I said triggered or upset this person and they're not happy for me for some reason or way or another, they have their own inner world going on. And there's no way that my one success is responsible for all this energy. They have whatever this energy is, it's coming from so many different sources, not just me. So it's much, much harder to do with friends and family, but it's when you get good at it, it becomes easy to do it with random strangers, and it becomes easier to just name your own mental ruminations. Okay, so my final tip in regards to all this is keep doing what feels right intuitively for your path, despite what anybody else says. Follow your intuition and follow what feels right. That could sound confusing and very broad because what the hell is intuition? That could also go in bad directions. So, okay, my intuition is saying I should eat a pint of ice cream. Should I just follow it? You know what I mean? So that could be confusing. So what I mean by that is specifically with artistic endeavors and life trajectories. So for example, I'll give an example from my own life. I'm a musician, I'm a pianist, and I love playing classical piano. When I play classical piano, it feels good. It feels right. I feel electrically charged. I feel alive. I feel spiritually connected. I feel amazing. When I started observing all the musicians around me, my colleagues and, my peers my age doing their thing, I noticed most of them were doing R&B, funk, pop music, rock music, punk music, and very few of them were doing classical music. And furthermore, I overheard some people that I really respect saying that they hate classical music, that it's boring, they don't like it, it's depressing, it's dreadful, it's outdated, it's lame, etc. Because of that, for a few years, I actually stopped playing classical piano because I thought that, wow, everybody around me is saying there's no use for it. I guess it really doesn't have a place in society. So it doesn't matter if I like it. No one's going to listen to me play it because it's just not popular anymore. So I'm going to have to start learning popular genres today. I stopped playing classical for a few years, and I do love R&B and I do love funk music. I just love music in general. So I'm not saying a lot of that music does make me feel happy and does make me feel alive. But if I had to weigh out the meter, like the electric meter from 0 to 100, it's like that music makes me feel 80% alive, which is good. But when I play some classical songs, particularly Bach, I'm a huge fan of Bach and Chopin and other classical composers as well. But Bach really does it for me for some reason. It's like I'm 120% charged. Like I'm over the limit emotionally. And it's like I let go of that part of myself because I was worried about what other people would think. So I think that's what I mean by follow your intuition. I'm not saying every intuitive impulse is correct. There's definitely impulses that can lead you down a negative direction. But I'm talking more those things that when you do them, they feel good. They feel right. And you can apply this to other things. Let's say you're trying to lose weight, right? All of a sudden, everybody has to insert their opinion about what's right for you. Oh my God, you should try keto. Oh my God, you need to do vegan. Oh my God, you need to do paleo. Let's say you give one of these things a shot and you find that paleo is the only thing that works for you and the only thing that makes you feel good and the only thing that makes you feel energized. But the studies say that whatever, you know what I mean? The studies say that you're not going to get these nutrients, and it's like, shit, well, whenever I do this, I feel amazing. So despite what the studies say, it's like, be a scientist for your own life and your own body and listen to your body and your intuition and what it's telling you, what feels good. So I don't know. That would be my final advice for how to deal with haters, is just keep doing you, what feels right to your intuition, and accept that you're going to piss some people off. I mean, think about any successful person. I mean, just think about the two presidents, like presidential candidates, or should I say. You have Donald Trump and you have Kamala Harris. Literally, like, at this point, I want to say it's 50-50 for the most part. You have like 50% of the people in the United States love and hate both of these people, but both of them are successful people doing their thing. So it's like the more you step into your own individual purpose and your own individual path in life, you're going to possibly create that polarity of reactions in people. You know what I mean? If you just make everybody happy, you're kind of just going to be an average blob of nothing, like, because you're not going to stand out in any kind of way. So you kind of just have to accept that the more you step into yourself, 50% of your friends and family are going to die off, but you're going to gain replacement of what died off with more love that's even stronger, if that makes sense. Anyways, that's it. I'm done with this episode number 126. Again, this is the Pranzata Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard today, Please don't forget to hit subscribe. I am so close to my first 1,000 subscribers, which is where I can grow this channel more and get it monetized. Also, I do take topics and questions from the listeners. So the next time I do a solo podcast, if there's a specific topic that you would like me to discuss, you can leave it in the comment section below. You can email it to me, or you can DM me on Instagram. I do check these things, and if I like the question or the topic, I will use it. You can find my Instagram below and my email below as well. All right, that's it. Pranzata Podcast, episode 126. Have a good day, guys. Bye.